I'm going to open up to the floor in a minute, but I'm going to ask David a question, which is from Working Title. I was reading the other day that Working Title is going to get back into TV. But is Working Title also experimenting with completely new kinds of content? Sort of, micro content suitable for YouTube, whatever, or for the internet? Is Working Title thinking about creativity, the grammar and so on, in a different way?
Not very much. Not really. Only in terms of promoting movies. Not in terms of creating micro movies or anything like that.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a boring answer, but it's true.
Sounds right.
Okay. I'm going to open up to the floor. Has anyone got a question for the panel? Gentleman here. Is there a microphone? If you can say who you are.
Thank you. John Enser from Oldswang. Question, I guess, particularly for Claire, but I'd be interested for what all the panel think. Clearly, one of the challenges for global success is how you engage with the big players in other related industries. The music industry would say we fed the beast that was Apple until it had an 80% market share. What recommendations do the panel have for strategies of engagement with the global beast, the Apples, the Amazons, the Microsofts and the Googles of this world?
Right. Well, that's a nice big one, isn't it? I think that the recognition that internet models are inherently global in nature is something that the music industry has struggled manfully against. And I have no idea. I mean, Adam and I have discussed this back and forth, but it's extraordinary. I don't know if you've noticed that the music industry is currently cycling very hard on subscription models again. And the last we heard of that was, I think it was a McKinsey quarterly thing in 1999 saying this was the future of the industry and this would lead it to the sun would never set on the growth trend. Of course, the music industry has halved since that article by McKinsey. So they certainly didn't see the future correctly, but the music industry is still playing very hard on these subscription models and trying to make ISPs pay monthly fees for usage. So I have to say that the music industry doesn't show any sign of taking account of the full awareness of the dealings that it has with global business models, which are really inherently efficient only on a global basis. In the case of iTunes, I think it's 29 countries, all served with server farms in Europe and on the West Coast, and it's actually not a particularly remunerative model for iTunes, but it shows that content models, basically are very, very hard to proselytize in any kind of segmented way. Anyway, I think the worry for me is much more on the Amazon. I mean, I don't think you can do anything about iTunes, and the fact that it hasn't evolved into being a channel for audiovisual content is something that actually we predicted in October 2005, which is when they launched the video part of their environment. And that was really because the iPod link was really the valuable part of that ecosystem. And, there are only so many commuters who want to watch movies on small screens. So I think the iPad, to your point, is going to be very interesting to see whether that budges the needle more and more in terms of that model. And certainly that's what Amazon has in mind. I think that the impact of Amazon has been one that is actually profoundly interesting on the music and movie industries, because it's a paradox. I mean, we all spent the last decade trying to digest some really preposterous ideas, and one of the most preposterous was the long tail theory, which has turned out to be rubbish. I think we actually said that at the time, but it was so idealistic, it sounded so nice that people would find a market for all of this lovely stuff that everybody's produced over so many decades all over the world. And actually, the really interesting thing about Amazon is that it tends to the winner-takes-all phenomenon that you see in algorithms generally. So you actually have this paradox of the bestsellers getting even bigger, both in books and movies and so on. So I think that actually that's reinforcing the value of the big brands and the studio model. So actually, in a way, although there's been a lot of sacrifices on pricing from the book industry, the music industry, and the film industry, in terms of the way Amazon prices dead against the supermarkets, and that's left a lot of all the margin that they waste. I mean, actually, the distribution side of the equation has been taking more and more margin progressively for 15 years, and Amazon has souped up that process. I don't think there's anything you can do about that process except watch your DVDs go to £4, frankly, over time, if that's what suits Amazon. But I think that is the channel has a very big impact, and it is actually really supports the studio model big time.
Okay. I think one interesting thing about, in a sense, the characteristics I listed at the very beginning of this, of film, which are very difficult, that makes the film business model very difficult to manage, are also protective of film. High unit costs, very high, all of those things. Whereas one might worry what's going to happen at the retail end of the value chain in terms of new devices like iPad or platforms or aggregators, and where will that leave us? There is some protection in the fact that film is a very, very difficult beast compared to a music track. And as Claire said, it's not. You can't disintermediate. You can't sell someone 1/8 of a movie, and to some extent there may be some protection. But I think it's a very interesting space there as to what may happen in terms of those other players.
They haven't been able to leverage, the music industry and the film industry has not been able to leverage the value of their content into any kind of understanding with the network owners in relation to control of content and control of piracy. Sorry.
Question at the back.
Jonathan Davis from Nowhere. I know from lots of places, I beg your pardon. I wondered if the panel could be a bit more terminologically consistent and clear. When you say piracy, are you talking about product that is not paid for or is never paid for? And in the break, Claire, that you were talking about how UGC was a phenomenon that hadn't materialised. But then I look at what people watch on YouTube, and this is UGC in the sense of that someone's filmed it themselves and it's of their own child, and so it's like Uber UGC. But does that count as pirate content because no one's paying for it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't count as pirate content, and it actually occupies a very small amount of consumption. I mean, obviously, it's a very significant amount of consumption in certain demographic groups, particularly boys aged between sort of 7 and 20. But it's in the scheme of things, and given that over 50% of the population of this country anyway is aged over 39, I mean, there are many other forms of consumption that take place. Now, when I talk about piracy, is really the unauthorized bootlegs as well, physical piracy as well as online piracy. I mean, there's a lot of attention paid to online piracy, but we know that physical piracy has really grown up in this last decade and become a very important. It's particularly important with regard to the emerging markets, where, I mean, the historical model of both the music and movie studios was that one day, the great unwashed would become people who bought product. And actually, if you look at both the movie and the film industries, there's been a kind of a deadlock since 2000 in terms of growth in global income from those emerging markets. So it's piracy in all its forms has a real impact.
Yeah, sorry, on that last point, there was a speech given yesterday at BSAC, the copyright collecting societies, about, for the first time, we've seen a drop in DVD piracy in China and that is the impact of online, and so that all the other attempts to try and limit DVD piracy and bootlegs have failed, but the emergence of broadband in China has demonstrated that even the pirates can't find a way of getting people to pay for broadband or for online.
Well, that's also because people prefer to stream. So increasingly, streaming is taking over. I mean, something Lavinia's highlighted a number of times is that streaming models in all their forms are actually quite. I mean, they're becoming increasingly prevalent and attractive. Certainly, in the music space and the movie space, that's the case. So that tends to diminish, quote unquote. It doesn't increase the amount of payment, though. It just diminishes one kind of piracy.